All right, good evening, listeners, listening to Lament of Hope blog and podcast. I'm really, blessed today. I know I say that a lot with all of the, people I've had on, but it's special today because I'm speaking with Deborah Dozier Potter, and she is the daughter of Joan Fontaine, who was a really famous actress. Kind of her peak was the 1930s, 1940s. A lot of black and white films, Alfred Hitchcock. I know she was in an adaptation of Jane Eyre, one of the early adaptations of that. Um, and I came across her daughter's website, and I didn't know anything about her daughter. And Deborah has a story, a really unique story that involves her writing a book about her dog Buster and the ways that he encouraged her through her journey with post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). And she's holding it up for those watching. Let
There's
Buster
Buster. There
lead.
we are. There we are.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
on. You can get it on Amazon. Just Google it, and it'll come right up. There's an audiobook too. Um, Deborah, to kind of start out, what made you pick Buster? Because he was a rescue dog, right? So what made you pick him
He
out of all the other
was.
dogs?
Yeah. Well, at the time, our town was very small, so there weren't a lot of dogs. Most of them were pit bulls and kind of scrawny things. I mean, this dog had some life to him. He was also very handsome, must say, very handsome dog. But he had some life, some verve. And so we asked about him when we went up to how's number 37 or whatever he was. And the guy said, "Oh, that is a really nice dog. He's a really, really nice dog. But somebody else wants him." And we told him to come back on Saturday because it's too soon to let the dog go.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, my husband made sure he was the very first person there on Saturday. And so he brought Buster home, and Buster immediately started chasing the cat. So it was just instant, like boom. And so I had to grab the cat who ripped apart my silk blouse. Poor thing. But over time, Buster came to realize this was his home. He had free range to come and go as he wanted. We had a dog flap, and our yard is fenced in the sense that it's got barbed wire around it. That's not going to hold a dog in there.
Yeah.
So he would go off, and then he'd come back, and then he'd come back, and he finally figured out that this is where he's going to get fed every morning, and this is where he's probably going to get loved.
Mm.
Um, Over time, of course, he and the cat became best friends. They chased each other all over the house. And I want to tell you a really weird boo story. I After Buster died, I just felt him next to me all the time. It was just constant. And
Mm.
I'm kind of down to earth person, frankly, I think. So I just said, "Buster, if that's you, let me know. I mean, either that or I'm nuts. Give me some sort of notice." So Earl and I, my husband, were sitting in this very room um, one morning, and the cat came running in the room, ran into the living room behind those doors there, jumped over the fence that was there to keep him out, ran all around circles in the living room. Well, he and Buster used to chase each other around the house all the time. So
Wow.
yeah, it was an amazing moment, I must tell you. But
And they used to chase each other just like that?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So I guess he stayed with me for a while, and dogs are your children. Your horse is your friend. I've lost both, and it's never easy. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have lost a dog. My book is dedicated to those who've had that one pet who's the love of your life. So many have had. Well, my book is dedicated to those people
Yeah.
because unless you've had that experience, it's really hard to understand, frankly.
Did you connect with him right away when he came to your home, or did it take a while to like emotionally
Well,
connect
it
with him?
took me a little while because we just had another dog die.
Okay.
And so we had a female by herself, and we needed to get some companion for her, which is why
Hmm.
we went to the shelter to look for a dog that turned out to be Buster. So it took me a little while. When you have loss like that, it takes a while. It
Yeah.
took me 3 years to get another dog after Buster died. So
Yeah.
um, it's so but I shouldn't say so much, it's terrible. He was a very special dog. He would do anything we asked of him. Catch the frisbee, go on an airplane. What was extremely special about Buster and me was he used to come with me when I rode my horse. And I fell off my horse one day and I broke 5 bones. And I was laying on the ground, and Buster would not let the EMTs near me. He had somebody he knew had to come and get him to get him away so that they could take care of me.
Hmm.
Um, he lay down on top of me. I mean, he just wouldn't let them. And so after that, about a year later, right on schedule, frankly, I developed severe PTSD, terrified of being touched because so many parts of my body had hurt for so long.
Hmm.
And I didn't know what it was. All of a sudden I just became very afraid. I just didn't want to go out at all, ever. It was like I talked myself out of it. Oh, let's not go to that tonight, honey. I don't really feel like going to. Well, let's just stay home tonight, honey. Let's just stay home. I had no idea that probably for almost a year I had not gone out anywhere.
Wow.
I didn't like having people in the same room with me or my husband in the same room with me. I didn't know what I had. And then I met a woman in Long Island where we have another house, at the time, we don't know, um, who had a service dog, and she wasn't blind or anything. So she explained to me that the term is service dog, and you have to see how you can have a service dog. I just wanted to bring Buster with me when I went there. I mean, and I didn't want to get thrown in jail for it, so I looked up the service dog and all the different illnesses that they treat people for. They're basically a medical option for anybody with a physical or mental disability. Keyword there is disability. Doesn't mean just because your dog's cute, you can bring it on.
Hmm.
And so I read, they had different illnesses, oh, depression, oh, I have that, this and that, and then PTSD, and then they described it. And I was like, oh my God, I have that. And
Hmm.
I, I, I just was really stunned. So I took him to a training place in Long Island because we were there quite a lot at that time. And I learned a lot of basic training things. He just went right to it. I mean, it's though he was born to take care of me. This is a dog that was always looking for a job. He's a border collie. Look at me talk about him in the present. And they need work, gotta have work. So he was 11 when
Hmm.
I realized I needed him to be with me for PTSD. So he finally had a job. So he was with me all the time. And um, the PTSD was terrifying. And there's nothing worse. There's a lot of worse things worse, but it was awful being afraid of myself, being afraid of what I might do. When someone comes up to me in a grocery store and I'm, that's not something you want to be doing every day. And
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
person thinks it's their fault and you got to apologize and you don't want to talk. I mean, it was an awful about 2 year period there. I did all kinds of different therapies because I didn't want to stay that way. Um,
Was the
thing with,
PTSD from the fall or from other
yeah,
things too?
from having all
Wow.
the painful bones. I had a shattered collarbone. I had a bone in my neck cracked. I had my broke my pelvis in 2 places. So there wasn't really a side of my body that wasn't in pain,
Yeah.
especially if it was touched. So I developed a fear of being touched.
Hmm.
Um, and Buster would basically form a little wall between me and the rest of the world whenever we went out somewhere. Um, and you know, in airports, things. We were building a house in Long Island, so I had to go there. I had to go back and forth. So he came on the plane with me, and back to that keyword disability. I did not know. I wasn't sure that I had a disability until my husband and I were at some benefit ball thing, and somebody started coming towards me. And I was like, in front of all these people. Oh, God. And it was somebody we knew well, it was an old friend. But
Yeah.
that's when I realized it was a disability, that this is something that's going to prevent me from having a normal life.
Hmm.
So, because Justin Dart was a very good friend of mine, Justin Dart, who's the Martin Luther King to people with disabilities. He's the person who got that ADA Act through the Congress. Very good friend. And I didn't want to violate the law. Um, in respect to him, he was not alive anymore, but still, the law is there to protect people. The law is very important where people are allowed to have a service dog who need a service dog. It's the people who violate it that, and understandably, I can understand why people want to do that,
Mm.
but it makes it harder for the people who really, really need it. So they start putting more and more restrictions on. Um, but everybody in the airlines were so kind and understanding. There were a few exceptions, not in the airlines, just in my experience with it, where people were just ignorant. No, I mean, they were rude because they were ignorant. They didn't know you could have they thought you had to be blind,
Yeah.
and that was also for me. But anyway, I really worked it. Different kinds of therapy. I didn't want to stay this way. And when I finally got to where I thought I knew I was up, well, Buster was in the backseat of the car, and I went into Kmart at Christmas time and bought something without him. He was old by then. I realized, oh my God, I'm normal now.
Wow.
He
Wow.
died right after that, not like that day, but a week or so after that. Once he knew I was well, he left me. Um, so that was our love story, and it's a love story. It's one of the best for me anyway. um, so I can talk about Buster all you want. If you, I mean, don't start me. Well, you did start me, didn't you? Uh,
Well, I was gonna say for your husband, how did because you were saying with touch, how was it with your husband for a while? Like, how would he kind of interact with you during that period that you were
he
trying
was
to?
he was an absolute saint.
Hmm.
I mean, we put a line of pillows between us in bed so that he didn't accidentally bump into me. And that you can carry that to as far as you want in terms of intimacy. Um, but if he tried to hug me, I'd flinch at first when I was in the hospital bed in the kitchen, he'd come home, he'd hug me, I'd flinch or scream, and then Buster would jump onto the bed, land on top of me, not touching a single broken bone. I mean, my poor husband, he was such a saint through the whole thing.
Hmm.
I mean, I've always known I'm lucky to have him, but he was fantastic. Um,
Did you notice any like tension? Was it hard for you guys at all? Because it's awesome for him to be so understanding, but were those times when even for you, like, you must have felt like, am I failing as a wife at times? Like, how did you feel with that?
well, I don't think of myself as failing as a wife. That's a whole other feminist tangent. But he, I just didn't like being this way. I just didn't like being in prison in my own body.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
when he and I would go somewhere, we would lock arms like this. When it was really inappropriate, to take Buster with me, like to the opera or something. We would hold hand really tight. And remember somebody said, "Oh, that's so romantic." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." Um, so I know. Um, he just he husbanded me in the true sense of that word husband, which is protected me and encouraged me. He was fantastic.
Hmm.
And so, I tried to have as normal a life as possible for him. I mean, he didn't want to
Sure.
be, he's an outgoing guy. So we did do things, and yes, we hung on to each other very tightly. And I was I was never in such a very great mood, but um, he knew why. And
Yeah. Do you remember?
we've been married for almost 45 years now.
Yeah.
And you have your moments, you have your periods, you have your phases. And this was a phase we went through. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time he touched you and it didn't bother you like it did before?
Funny. I'm sure there was such a time, but it doesn't stand out.
Hmm.
But it's a sweet question. Thank you. Yeah.
What do you, I just to go back a little bit, you were talking about the failure for a wife thing and you commented on a feminist thought. Can you like elaborate on that? That's interesting. What did you mean by that?
Well, I don't think being a wife is a job
Hmm.
that we're being graded for. And that society, there's this checklist of how you have to be, and we all growing up in the 50s, we all had those things. I
Yeah.
mean, you had to be I don't know, this in bed and a this during the day and this in the morning and a good housekeeper. You know, um, those were the things that we who were girls in puberty in the 50s were taught. And then along came the pill. So we were like all very torn
Yeah.
during the time. So I don't think that being a wife in general is a job. I think everybody has their different relationship, their different definition of what a wife needs to be. A wife
Yeah.
needs to be a partner, needs to be a partner in a marriage. But whatever those expectations are of each partner are different for each couple.
Hmm.
And I didn't marry my husband because I needed a roof over my head. I certainly had one. I had my own business and I had all sorts of stuff. Um, we just wanted to be partners in life. We just felt like we just belonged to each other all the time. We had very similar dreams and goals and
Yeah.
ambitions and philosophies and we still do love each other very much. So we wanted to be life partners. But that's the decision we made. In terms of running the house, I'd never run a house before we got married. We never lived together before we got married. We started courted on the phone and through letters. So at first, it was very hard for me to suddenly have to take care of a house. I'd had like a 1 bedroom apartment, and so
Yeah.
and suddenly take care of a child. Earl came along with a 7-year-old wonderful boy. There's a lot for me to cope with at first. So,
Yeah.
his mother, I'm sure, wanted me to wait on him hand and foot and be what we were taught in the 50s that a wife should be. Um, she and I had a few headbutts, but became to really love each other very much after a while. But she was one time, it was really funny. We went to the grocery stores right after we got married. And I said, oh, let's get some apples. Oh, they don't like apples. I said, yeah, but I do. Hello. And she says, well, you're going to lose him. If you don't, yeah, you're going to lose him. I said, well, did it ever occur to you that he could lose me? You know, so it was very funny. No, um,
And this is your mom you're talking about?
this is my mother-in-law.
Your mother-in-law. Okay.
So, the whole wife thing, it takes time. When we divided up the chores, he deals with most of the outside stuff, unless I deal with what the outside looks like.
Yeah.
He deals with all repair people, men, usually men, because they don't pay any attention to the women, and we just divide up what there is to do, and because we both earn money, neither one of us is the breadwinner. Um,
Yeah.
so
Do you find that is there something in society you think right now that is difficult for women, like an expectation that you find really hard that you wish was different?
it's hard for me to know the answer to that because I don't know a lot of young couples.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
my older women friends have advised me to do that because when you get older, all your friends die and you got to have younger friends. But we have a few young couple friends, but I don't really know what their marriage dynamic is. Every marriage has a different dynamic.
Yeah.
So, um, but it requires a lot of laughter. You gotta have a sense of humor. I mean, when my husband gets angry, he is so funny. I just start laughing. And so you know, and when I get all angry, he walks out of the room, you know, and so, oh, you have your different ways of dealing with things. But I highly recommend to everybody, laugh as much as you can, because every little spat is only going to be one of many in a lifetime partnership.
Yeah.
So, you know.
When you were talking about the 1950s and growing up in that time, do you remember anything as a kid that was really hard about growing up in the 1950s?
Well, I mean, for me, I had parents who were mostly absent.
Yeah.
So I was raised in a great deal by domestic servants who lived in the house. Um, I had divorced parents, which was not as widespread as it is today. Back
Yeah,
in those days,
for
it
sure.
was some fairly rare. Certainly, me in my Catholic school, I was the only kid in my class who had divorced parents. Um, but so I lived in two different houses. I had two different expectations of what I was supposed to be, who I was
Mm,
supposed to be. And you know, yes, that was difficult. But on the other hand, we were very affluent. You know, I had a big swimming pool, and we had, you know, we traveled, and we didn't lack for anything.
yeah.
Um, so you know, I think it all balances out. You know, I think we all get the same number of cards in our deck. They're just different. And so, but that's what I had to, when you're a kid and you're going through a hardship and you hear about all these certainly abused kids and stuff, they don't know there's something wrong with that. They don't know it's hard. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't know that living in two homes was hard. I just did. I just knew I was supposed to be somebody else in each of those houses,
Hmm.
literally somebody else.
What kind
Um,
of person did you have to be? Are you talking for your mom and your dad? Like, how did you have to
well, my
change?
father lived in Beverly Hills. He was in the film industry as well, mostly television at that time. I mean, film was before it, but then television came along. So,
Yeah.
uh, and his wife was a former actress, and she had a daughter, and it was very sort of much more casual, and certainly not as fussy, and not as, there weren't quite so many rules. I mean, with my mother, I had to speak in almost a British accent one time. One time I came back from my month in the summer with my father, and then came back to the house with my mother, my stepfather, excuse me, and my favorite stepfather, and a foster sister. And she was furious with me. She says, "You sound terrible. You're talking through your nose. Ugh. I mean, oh, can't stand your voice. Oh, I was like, hey, it's my first night back." So a year later, I put on a British accent when I came back. Just did that. I probably was 8, you know, and
Wow.
or younger. And she just, oh, she thought it was wonderful.
Hmm.
So, but again, every family has its own dynamic too. So its own rules and
Did you
uh,
find it hard to, be the daughter of Joan Fontaine? Because I know now, unfortunately, most young people are like, who? Like, no one knows.
yeah.
But, in your day, she was big. So, like,
Plus,
did you like that? Or did you kind of wish, hey,
well,
I kind of
I
wish
brought
she's,
along for you a picture of, can you, well, I guess you can see there,
yeah, I can see it.
what it was like to be the daughter of a movie star. There we are, posing for this picture. And look how tightly she's holding on to us so we don't move. Because in those days, it was all flash cameras and you couldn't move. And look how miserable we are. Look at our faces. Just, you
Yeah, you do not
know,
look happy.
and she's got her fake smile on. Anyway, so that that was what it was like to be the daughter of a movie star, to be the daughter of my particular mother. This is the cartoon I brought you.
Are you the chick?
Yeah.
Did you draw it?
No, no, a friend of mine sent it to me years ago. I just love it. Because
So
there's
your
so many
mom's,
people, so many of your readers are, oh, then they can't see that, can they? I'll describe it. It's a picture of a hen looking down at a baby chick that just came out of the egg, and the eggs and pieces all around the baby chick. And the mother hen says, "Now look what you've done." So I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to that.
oh yeah, oh
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. So
So did you find you just there was a lot of expectations all the time?
yes, and a lot of how's it going to look? A lot of how's it going to look? How's it going to look for my career if you blank? How's
Yeah.
it good? A lot of that, everything was that. How's it going to look? How's it going to look for us? Not you, child, but how's it going to look for me? And I mean, she blamed all sorts of things on us meaning my foster sister and myself. Um, I think she was bipolar. They didn't call it that then. But look, now that we're all much more aware of what being bipolar is like.
Yeah.
Uh, I, I'm quite sure that that's what she was, as a person. Now, right now, I'm going into what she was like as a person, what she was like as a movie star. I mean, she was gorgeous. She
Oh
was
yeah.
glamorous. She was sophisticated. She was funny. She had a great wit. She was very smart, and she dressed beautifully. Remember when we were little, she was getting dressed. She says, "Now go in my closet and fetch my electric blue shoes, and then go fetch the hat and bring it to me." And I loved that. Because we had attention then. It's just she was always she was away quite a lot. So um it was just so nice when she did give us attention, give me
Yeah.
attention. I should talk about myself, give me attention, even if it was, doing things for her or being her cooking assistant in the kitchen, whatever meant that I was able to be part of her, that I was accepted, meant so much to me.
Hmm.
Um, and and then she was away a lot making movies, but that's what she had to do.
Yeah.
um you know I mean, she didn't have to be a movie star, but she was. And sure, she could have got a job as a hostess at a restaurant, but that's not didn't fit her role. So but she was away making movies, um, and then she would come back. And in those days, you didn't have email, you didn't have cell phones. So during all that time, we had no contact from her at all while she was
Hmm.
gone. One time she was away making a movie, and we had a Hungarian housekeeper. She would hire these people to live in the house and take care of us like 2 days before she left to make a movie for 12 weeks. I mean, just, you know, childcare has always been hard to find, and it was hard then too. And then we had this one woman who she was Hungarian. She was wonderful, and her little boy was with her. Istvan, his name was, and she was Maria, I think. And
Hmm.
I cut myself on a cap gun, just a little blister thing. And my father, one time I skinned my knee, and he put peroxide on it, and it didn't hurt. It's great. And so I said to her, "Look, you're a little kid, you get a cut." And I must have been 4 or 5. Um, and I mean, it was horrible. I want my daddy, I wanted my daddy because my daddy knows how to do this without hurting, but I want my daddy. So she called my father, and he came and got me. Well, my mother was absolutely furious when she got back that she had done that. Well, there's no way to get a hold of her. What else could this woman do? She, of course, fired her. And then she said to me, Debbie, I was called. Now I hear that name, I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna be spanked at any moment. Um,
Oh.
I've lost my contract with RKO because of you, because of what you did. Because it was like,
Hmm.
okay, how can that be? But I believed her. No, I had no reason not to.
Sure.
So um, everything was how it affects her. She was a narcissist, tremendous narcissist, and with good reason. She was gorgeous, and
Yeah.
so um, we we were never really very close once, because I was always such a disappointment to her. Um,
Yeah.
and and that's, how do I say this? I once read a headline in a magazine. It was a teenage magazine, and it was about psychology and psychiatry. And it said, it may be your parents' fault you're the way you are, but it's your fault if you stay that way. And I've
That's
always
good.
taken that to heart. Yeah,
That's
I've
really
always
good.
taken that to heart. Yeah. So I became a good parent myself. That was the best way to stay that way.
Well, I was gonna ask you, it must be hard because, it's interesting because, I have my own insecurities about being a mother someday, but I'm just, when you're talking about how your mother reacted, I mean, were you afraid to have kids of your own? Was kind of like, what if I mess up in some way? Because you knew how it affected you so much.
Well, I think back on this a lot because when I did have a therapist in high school, she asked me that question, you know, how do you feel about having children? And I said, well, that I'm afraid they won't love me. And she said, oh, children love their parents. Don't worry about it. The children love their parents. And I think back on that. The reason I said that, I now realize, is because I didn't love her.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and it was very hard to even know that at that time, that
Yeah.
that's how I felt about it. I was afraid of her, frankly. Um, So Earl and I tried very hard to have children. We just didn't. I mean, he came along with a 7-year-old boy who's just delightful, was just absolutely wonderful. He and I bonded immediately. I fell in love with both of them, you know. And he's now in his early 50s, but we still love each other very much. And every phone conversation, I love you too. So, and no parents are perfect. There's always something. I
Oh,
had mood
yeah.
swings too. I had mood swings before we got better drugs. Before I got more therapy. I had mood swings that um, required a lot of patience on the behalf of my son and my father, not my father, my husband.
Yeah.
Um, but I dealt with it. That was the thing. I didn't expect them to adjust to it. I dealt with it. I fought it and got past it. So.
I think that's, I mean, it's an inspiration now because, to be honest, I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like a lot of times when I talk to people, so many people have gone through hurt, so it's not even unusual. Now it's like, my parents did this or this happened to me, and it's not even like, wow, that's a shocker. It's
Mhm.
pretty common now, unfortunately, that people are very broken homes, broken families, and situations. But a lot of times it's just like, well, this happened to me and this is the way I am, so too bad, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and it's sad because there seems in some ways there seems to be this um you grasp onto the victimhood kind of title and you're like, I'm so proud of this, but it doesn't help you or make it better. um and so it's so interesting to hear, like when you say, I don't ask people to adjust. I want to be able to relate better to people and to be able to work on the areas that I know I'm struggling in. um, it's just not a common mantra anymore. I don't know how you feel about that, but it's not common. And when you meet someone like that, you're like, that's really cool. It's an inspiring thing.
Well, I don't have a lot of patience for people who talk about their life in with this phrase. I can't because I just I have no sympathy for people who start sentences that way. You know, but there's so many people who excuse their things in their life that um, get in their way, get in their way of anything, love, you name it, get in the way of by saying I can't because. Um,
Hmm.
because we can do this. We try hard enough, we can. And I'm starting to sound like an Obama commercial, but I mean, you know, it- we can if we try, if we really want to. That's the thing. Nobody's going to try if they don't really want to succeed.
What do you think in your life you're most proud of that you've kind of achieved or you see yourself achieving in a way?
It's, it's funny you should ask because it's pretty simple. I mean, I grew up with divorced families with different people, exes, and this guy is ex and her ex and everybody's ex, and my own family, my friends I went to high school with, all of them getting divorced all the time. Um, I achieved a lot of things professionally, and now my husband and I have achieved a wonderful thing with the company we have and thing. I mean, we're amazingly successful. I'm just thrilled for us. But what I'm most proud of is having one marriage that's lasted. That to me, with my background, is what I'm most proud of. And, if everything else falls apart, I'm okay with it because I've achieved that. And for some people, it's like, oh my God, you'd think, you had, because you have a nice car, but, you know, um, no, that's all I ever really, in deep down in my soul, wanted growing up. Um, you go to Catholic school and they tell you, oh, you marry one person for life, and oh, there's and or you hear all these fairy tales they read you before you go to bed. Oh, it was love at first sight, and they lived happily ever after. And well, I sort of bought that, and so, but yeah, I mean, I have an absolutely wonderful husband, and we've been together for almost 45 years now. So, and I
What do you
wasn't
love
married to him before.
what
So,
do you love most about him? I mean, he seems like a
uh,
very understanding person based on all you've said.
he is. He is. I just love that it's not that he's happy all the time, but he tries to be. He doesn't take things terribly seriously. He doesn't get bent out of shape. He was also a very successful attorney, very successful law firm. Now he's a very successful business person. And he's having fun making documentary films. That's a new hobby at age 80. So he just accomplishes what he sets out to do and doesn't hurt people in the process. Um, he gets really absorbed in things. Our connection is unstable, it's saying here. He gets very absorbed in things. So you have to kind of pull him out of the bowl and get his attention.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, it's, but that's part of his ability to accomplish things. And also he loves me, which I still find hard to believe why anybody would. But anyway, it's, I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm literally pinching myself now when I say that because um, it's funny, I'm 75 and I'm starting to look back on my life and think, wow, that person really liked me. Or, that person really wanted to be my friend, not because of who my mother was. Wow, it's funny. I just never part of, again, having a movie star or a famous person for a mother is that everybody identifies you with that, or you think they do, whether they do or not. It's just a lot of times they
Sure.
do, but
Yeah.
most of the time they don't. And it's hard to know the difference. It
Yeah.
really is. And oh, he just, they're just friends with you because you have famous parents. Oh, okay. Um, and I just had to look back on my life and just think, wow. So for my husband, knowing that he loves me is still hard for me to grasp. I know he does. He says he does. I mean, he does everything, that indicates that he does. But it's like, why me? You know,
Yeah.
so
Well, it's
he's also
interesting
very
too,
handsome.
because that's very important.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
I was gonna say for Buster too, it seemed like he loved you a lot. You've had some very fond attachments in your life.
I have. I've been so lucky, just so lucky. And I had a difficult childhood. but most people do. I mean, I don't know anybody who does. I know like a few people, like maybe two or three people who say they had a wonderful childhood. But we, we've achieved a lot of things because we wanted to. We wanted our marriage to last. We wasn't that we had some rocky moments where we had to go to couple school, and we learned a lot at those places. Um, but that's because we wanted to, because we wanted our marriage to last. If people want success in anything, then they can achieve it. It's not everybody wants to. Not everybody wants to be happy, frankly. Not everybody wants to be loved. Um, and who are we to judge them? We can't really judge them. But I knew that if whatever I wanted in life, if I really wanted it, I had to make it happen. I didn't have parents to do it for me, so um, and I think it's been a good trait. It served me well. And
Yeah.
the book I wrote about Buster is how I got myself through a really crippling uh, disorder.
Yeah.
Um, I could have just stayed in the house since for the rest of my life, not gone out, being
Yeah.
it took me a really long time to be comfortable in crowds. That took years. Big crowds, especially where where I knew people and they were going to come up and touch me, especially this shoulder, the collarbone shattered and now it's in two different parts. And people love to just grab that left shoulder when they say hello, but now sometimes I'll flinch, sometimes I'll go, and then I'll have to say, and the other person goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No, 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 it's not your fault. It's me, and especially if it's
Ye-
somebody I don't like, you know.
Oh yeah,
So
that would probably make it worse. You
yeah.
should get some sort of t-shirt that says like I'm a right shoulder person or something so that people just automatically know that's the one to
Well,
go to.
yeah, it's so much better now, just because I wanted it to be. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Well,
I
I
wanted.
just I because I want to be respectful of your time too, Deborah. What do you think, just as a last question, how would you encourage other, because as you said, there is a higher awareness now, more people know about these different, medical conditions and disabilities and struggles that are in a sense, I don't want to say normal, but they're becoming more typical that you have more people struggling with it, and it's becoming more of actually a normal way of life for a lot of people. Um, how would you encourage someone who's going through PTSD, and it's really hard because especially hard when you're just starting out trying to grow in it.
Mm.
What would you say to somebody like that?
Fight on, fight on. I mean, the glib remark would be get over yourself. But one that really is what matters is that they fight on, that they continue to try to get past it, to manage it. You don't get cured of it. You doesn't get over it. You learn to manage it.
Yeah.
And, fight on, learn to manage it, find ways to manage it, and get a little bit more competent every day. Because I know how they feel. I was afraid of myself. I was afraid of what I might do when I went out. Am I going to scream in the restaurant? Am I going to, and but I just kept fighting. I just kept getting past it and learning how to manage it.
Yeah.
Um, and I know for some people, their PTSD is so much more severe than mine was. I mean, people who've been in wars and things like that. There's
Yeah.
so many different forms of therapy now for PTSD. Find one, just find one and follow it. Trust the process. And if you don't like that one, then find another one. But stick with it. Stick with the fight. Don't cave and crawl inside. Don't be the snail that pulls back into the shell. That's a lonely place to be.
Yeah.
Fight on.
Well, Deborah, thank you. I mean, I've been encouraged. This has been such a wonderful conversation. And if you can hold up that book one more time, just for people
Oh,
watching,
thank you.
if
Yes.
if you want to see, if you want to get a copy of her book, Let
Get
Buster
it
Lead.
on Amazon, because
Yeah, highly
bookstores
recommend taking it a
are
look.
their worst enemy. Anyway,
Well,
so thank you for that.
well, Deborah, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for asking me.